Hey, Scott Easton here over at Easton IT. I hope that you're doing well today. If you're like a lot of our other MIM clients, then I'm sure that you've got a lot of questions about what's the current state of MIM, what's Microsoft's plans to ultimately replace MIM, and what are some other potential third-party products out there that you could switch to if you just want to get away from MIM completely. In the upcoming video, I'm sitting down with David Steadman. David is former Microsoft, where he worked in the product group over there developing MIM. He's also the co-author of the MIM 2016 handbook. David and I are going to talk about all things MIM. This is for managers, directors, even developers, and those who run MIM on a daily basis. We're going to talk about what's going on with MIM today, where we see MIM going in the future, what we think Microsoft is going to do to potentially replace MIM, and then we're going to also briefly touch on some potential replacement options for MIM. So I hope that this video answers all of your questions, but in case it doesn't, certainly feel free to reach out to me. Let me know if you have any questions, and certainly let us know if there's anything that we can do to help you with your MIM installation. So again, thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Take care. Bye. It's Scott Easton along with David Steadman. He's the co-author of the MIM 2016 handbook. As promised, we want to discuss what's the current state of MIM and what we think is going to happen here in the future. So we're recording this the first quarter of 2023. So keep that in mind as we go through the deck here. So what we're going to talk about today is we'll give you a brief overview of where things stand with MIM, some key things to know about MIM support from Microsoft. We're going to do a brief licensing refresher because we think that's going to be really important in helping you make some of your decisions about what to do with MIM in the future. We'll discuss some potential options around MIM replacements. We'll give you some recommendations. And then we're also going to talk about what you need to do to be able to get to 2029, where currently MIM is expected to be end of life. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it. So for many of you out there, MIM is a mission critical application. It does a lot of stuff for you. It's handling your new hires, creation of AD accounts, provisioning of these accounts, assigning users to Active Directory groups, plus a whole lot more. So it's very critical for your day-to-day operations. MIM has recently, or I should say Microsoft has recently updated MIM support dates, which is going to impact the platform's lifecycle. There is a lot of uncertainty, and David and I get this a lot from our clients. We get a lot of questions about what's the future of MIM and what are some potential replacement products out there from Microsoft. Many organizations are trying to determine, based on this, should they replace MIM or not. This presentation is going to give you our guidance around what we think is going on with MIM today and what you can do. We're not affiliated with Microsoft, so these opinions are our own. So with that being said, let's get into it. So here are some key things to know about MIM support. So recently, Microsoft changed this from January 13th, 2026, where we initially expected MIM to come to the end of the road, and it's been pushed out to 2029, January of 2029. The good news is we expect Microsoft to keep issuing hotfixes for the product as issues come up. We don't know if if Microsoft is frankly going to be issuing service packs or any type of major enhancements for MIM. We certainly hope so, but we just don't know at this point. The good news is that if you own MIM today and you're highly dependent upon it, it's going to keep running as is, of course, unless something happens in your environment until 2029. So David, any thoughts on key things that everyone needs to know about MIM support?
Yeah, I think in general, if you're running the MIM sync engine and you're operating now, none of that's going to really change. You can continue to operate. If you have a P2 license, you already own MIM, which again, that's a key indicator, right, of things to come, right? So again, from a support standpoint, P2 is great. You can install the sync engine, do what you need, and continue to move forward. And as well as we all know, like hot fixes are important. I know they just released some hot fixes a couple months ago or about a month ago related to MIM. And then you also see the connectors that are out there that continue to update those connectors as well. So I don't think there's going to be a huge change in sort of how they're operating today.
Mhm.
Again, just my opinion. And the uncertainty is really around not sort of the actual software itself. It's the uncertainty of where do we go from here. Um,
Exactly,
so,
exactly.
and
And
that's sort of
get
where
into it.
most of the customers I talk about is where do we go from here. But yeah, so things to know about the MIM licensing, right? We have P1, P2.
Hmm.
And that's, again, from what I can tell, is not going to change, which is great. P2 allows you, P1 and P2. P2 allows you with the features within Azure. So what we call PIM. And in the Microsoft product or the MIM product, we called that PAM. So you can
Right.
see sort of there's a,
So real quick, just for those that are maybe not familiar with the terms PIM and PAM, could you just elaborate just real
yeah,
briefly
so
on that?
PAM was privileged access management, and then PIM is it's the privileged identity management.
Gotcha,
So
gotcha.
again, it's sort of the brother and I call them the brother and the sisters, right,
Okay.
of the identity management stack. So again, as you can see, they're sort of aligning features as we move forward, and you're starting to see that with the access governance capabilities that are being rolled out. So I think as long as you're keeping up with sort of the end-to-end or the matching, I think we'll be in good shape from again, where do we go from here? If you're a Microsoft shop, right? And that's key. And then,
Exactly, exactly.
yep. So I think like we look at the other licensing options, right? Require each user who identity management MIM are doing more than synchronization, right? That's really the client access cow. It's been
Hmm.
around, right? If you're using SharePoint and you have the client access license that you need, right? This is really typically the MIM portal where that client access license is required. Nothing has really changed around the licensing, other than
Right,
the top one. Like if you own P2, you own MIM,
right.
literally, so, which is good.
Can, in your work with clients out in the field from a licensing perspective, are most of them running P1, P2, or are they still doing the Cal and Windows Server license model?
Most of the folks that I've been running into now either have decided to move to the P2 only
Hmm.
because they are a Microsoft shop and they want to take advantage of PIM in the cloud,
Yes.
and then also other features that are brought about because of that P2 license, right? So,
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, and I think before we leave this slide, just for our viewers here, the the main takeaway from this slide especially is that if you have P2 licenses, you really own MIM. You're not paying any extra licensing costs, and so you own MIM. It's, I guess, free like a puppy. Is there an official MIM replacement product? Again, David worked for the product group in Microsoft. The views that he'll express today are not part of any official Microsoft announcement. So David is really acting as a concerned citizen, if you will, based on our knowledge outside of Microsoft. So I think that's very important to let everyone know that we don't work for Microsoft. David doesn't work for Microsoft. So these are all unofficial thoughts about what's happening here. But the first point is for clients out there who have asked us, is there an official product to replace MIM? There hasn't been something officially announced yet. But David, there are a few things cooking. One in particular that you actually worked on the Azure AD ECMA host. Could you talk a little bit about that?
yeah, most definitely. Thanks, Scott. So really around yes, there has been no official product replacement. And as you've seen in most of the Microsoft product stack, like not even MIM related, you see this correlation between one for one. So essentially, they're looking at what do they have available on-prem and how do they
Hmm.
match it up with a similar capability, not the exact capability, but similar capability with the intention of, again, that forward progression into the cloud to fit the full stack. So one of these items, which is near and dear, is the Azure AD ECMA host. So this was started when I was at Microsoft. And it was funny, I was before it released last year, I was like, I wonder whatever happened to that prototype.
Hmm. Right.
So lo and behold, they released it. It was Azure AD ECMA host. This is using a capability to actually, it's utilizing SCIM.
Hmm.
And from there, it actually talks to the ECMA host or ECMA, which
Okay.
is the MIM connector, which is very powerful because how many connectors do you know about, Scott, that are out in the woods that folks have created, right? So the
Right.
idea
A lot.
was being able to bring the SCIM technology and have it interpreted at the connector level. Now, this first rev, right, Azure AD ECMA host only provides for SQL and LDAP. But
Hmm.
the concept is to be able to bring other connectors in and be able to use that SCIM technology from the cloud to the on-prem. So
Gotcha.
to create the
But
update items within SCIM. So very powerful, but that's their first rev of it. And I hope that succeeds because I think that bridges the gap of the question is, where do I go? Like I still have
right.
on-prem, I still have this. How do I reduce my footprint from MIM? And again, if you have LDAP or SQL, the one thing I would look at is the Azure AD ECMA host, right? That way you
Okay.
move most of your identity management up to the cloud. You utilize the SCIM capability that would provision it down to on-prem, whether it's a SQL or LDAP. So
Very
that's
cool.
the first point. Definitely cool. And as we talked about earlier, right, you own MIM with the P2 licenses, so you would own all these capabilities. Um,
Gotcha.
the next item, again, one for one, as we talk about, like we have SSPR, right? What is the comparable to that, right? Azure SSPR, right? With auto enrollment. So powerful capability in Azure. It's has many different auto enrollment features, right? They rolled out where it's a now you can do auto enrollment for password reset and also MFA all in one
Right.
bucket, right? So that feature set is powerful because users only really want to register once, not twice.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think the important point here is that really for clients who are, say, moving from an old version of FIM or MIM and going to say, a more modern OS, because, say, like Windows 2012 is end of life, typically we're recommending the clients that they not implement the MIM password portal on prem, utilize the Azure self-service password portal, just because it's got all those goodies that you talked about, from the auto registration to MFA,
Yeah,
and
and everything
the
under the
ability
hood
to
that, yeah,
exactly,
exactly. That under the hood of that, like you have your conditional access policies, you have your Intune autopilot integration, right, related to SSPR and MFA. So the sort of encompasses all those different technologies together to make a what I call a great user experience, like getting my
exactly,
machine, registering, and then from there, again, I'm off to the races. I don't have to call anybody, and it makes life a whole lot easier for those mobile users. Um,
exactly. One thought that I wanted to get from you here, and obviously this is a really popular feature for on-premise MIM implementations, are is group management.
mhm.
A lot of, either ad hoc group management or even criteria-based group management, and that's another area where Microsoft has made the recommendation to, where possible, actually try to do that inside of Azure AD. So, what are your thoughts there as far as porting group management functionality over to Azure AD?
So that's a great question, and as we all know, that MIM and AAD Connect are really the biggest hurdles when you talk about sort of how do I manage my groups? How do I get my groups up to the cloud? Because the major factor that we've had is around authority of source, right? So now you're trying to figure out how do I get the authority of source. So Microsoft came up with, again, a way to do that. We have criteria-based groups to also include custom attributes, to also include all those great things that MIM provide, to also Exchange provided. Because if you remember, Scott, Exchange has its own criteria-based
Right.
groups. So
Exactly.
being able to figure out all those different group types and what the criterias are, AAD Connect, and with the Microsoft 365 group, you can move those groups up to, again, there is a process for that, right? If you have your source group and then you're going to have to create a new group, there is a process around group, what we call group write back and nested group write back. So
Hmm.
essentially being able to simulate what you're doing on-prem, but you're shifting the dynamic. So now the group write back group is going to feed into what your old on-prem group was. So there is a process there, but again, this is how you can actually get that, achieve that. And the advantage of doing that is one, you can manage your group through Office 365. The
Hmm.
end user can actually manage the group as well with the M365 group. Another advantage is M365 groups, you can actually integrate into your teams. So the whole items come nested together, and it's
Right.
forming that unified view around groups, management, and then access controls, right? So makes life
And
a
I
whole lot
think,
easier.
well, and one other important thing to point out is that for those that are able to actually implement that group management model in Azure, then the need for having the MIM portal on-prem really goes away. Then so
That
you're simplifying your environment.
that is
So
correct.
that's another big plus there, as well as that one less moving part to for those clients or customers that have to manage on-prem MIM. So
Oh,
good
you're
good
absolutely
points
right.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely does take
So
a lot of energy because, again, most organizations have a lot of groups, right? And if you're
yes,
running MIM, you probably have a lot of criteria-based groups.
yes,
So, again, for all my MIM experts out there, MIM scripts, again, export your config, again, look at your criteria, and then from there you can port it over to group. So there is options there to make life a whole lot easier. But definitely a must if you're looking to shift, right? That's the key
yes.
word is shifting from a minimum on-prem footprint, because again, most organizations won't
Yep.
or can't. They're always going to be in a hybrid type of scenario. But the idea is the shift, right? Shift a lot of that. Hey, I got to manage this app or that app. Let Azure do that. So now
Yeah.
all you're doing is
Exactly.
configuring.
Exactly. Yeah. So great points there. So to really sum it up here is that while Azure AD can do a lot from the group management and SSPR perspective, and even potentially things with the ECMA host that you talked about. Right now, there's still not a what we'd say a full replacement for the MIM sync engine now, but that certainly may change in the future. So I think our main advice here for those of you that are running MIM on-prem, especially the MIM sync engine, is to just keep up with the news from Microsoft in this space to see what the developments bring. But obviously, per David's recommendations, look at porting SSPR over to Azure AD. Again, it's fantastic functionality, a lot better than what you get in the MIM portal. And then to David's point, the group management, where possible, look to bring that over to Azure AD.
Right. And
So,
to add to that, Scott, is really around looking at your workload, your individual workload that MIM is serving. And MIM sometimes is serving multiple different workloads, whether it's synchronization of objects, users,
mhm,
groups, custom objects, maybe you got custom items. But the whole idea is to minimize that footprint and then shift certain workloads up to the cloud. And that way, depending on whatever the scenario is that does come out from Microsoft to say, hey, maybe they're going to slim down the MIM sync engine to, again, what it was born from. It's funny how MIM was just a sync engine and maybe it's going back there. I don't know.
I
Um,
think, yeah, that's, I had did a similar type of presentation with another Microsoft MVP, and he had a great point about that, where he said that MIM started out as the sync engine way back when, as Zoom it, and not to dork out on
yeah,
the history of MIM, but it started out as the sync engine. It did a great job, and really now it's
it
almost going
continues.
back to its roots.
It
Yeah,
continues to do a great job. And again, if that's its sole purpose in life, especially for on-prem scenarios, then why not? And again, not even
exactly.
on-prem scenarios because you got the capability of custom connectors. So again,
Yes.
we'll see what the future holds, but it's interesting how time warps back. So
There you go. There you go. All right, so let's talk about potential third-party options out there as well. We've had a few clients who, for a number of reasons, have decided to jump ship and leave MIM behind. We're going to do a presentation on a particular case study around that in a later part of these series, not on this presentation. But we have had some clients, for a number of reasons, be it scalability or organizational size, that have decided to leave MIM. And typically, at least from what I've seen, and I'll be curious to get your take on this, David, most of the clients that I know or have who have left MIM or have actively investigated leaving MIM, they've looked really in three areas. It's been SailPoint Identity Now, which is the cloud-based version
mhm.
of SailPoint. There's a cloud-based version of Omada, even a great on-prem version as well. And then finally, there's the Savient product as well, which is SaaS-based. Have you and your clients, David, what are you seeing the same
Yeah,
thing?
I've
Anything
seen the
different?
same. I've seen the same scenario, but I've also seen where they think they have to go get another identity management product, right?
Hmm.
And the key thing that I look at, that I ask them is, what are you trying to replace? Are you trying to replace your workload, or are you trying just to replace MIM? So
Right,
that's sort of, in my mind, the key question. And I always go back to, you already own MIM or you already own X, right? So
right,
if there's a scenario that can be covered by Azure and Skim and again, SaaS app, or again, whatever the scenario may be, I would look down those options first before, again, investing heavily because these are a new investment in a new identity management platform. Now,
right,
identity management at its core hasn't really changed at its core, right? All these products provide it. MIMS provides it, as well as Azure provides it with Skim, right? So depending on that scenario, the key is looking at that core. What are you trying to achieve? Replacing product
right,
or replacing workload? In my opinion, companies should and businesses should look at the workload because sometimes that workload may change based on them moving to or shifting to the cloud so that what they did on prem may inherently change because of the new capabilities in the cloud. So maybe what they were doing 10 years ago maybe won't apply. So they won't need
right.
X, Y, and Z. So yeah,
So
I
basically, what you're saying here is that before before dropping MIM and Azure to go on to a third-party tool, take a look at what you may already own with those P2 licenses and what you're trying to achieve, because the tools inside of Azure AD may actually be able to do what you want versus purchasing a third-party product. Am I getting
correct.
that point
Yep.
correct? Okay, yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
And again, I'm gonna go off on a sort of tangent, but the things that you look at, like for instance, Azure Functions, again, other different areas of Azure that could probably achieve the same process and cost you a whole lot less because it's by
Exactly.
consumption. So just a
Exactly.
just a good
Exactly.
point.
Yep. So And we'll get more into this in some of our future videos, but just a little bit of a taste here for those of you that are considering third-party tool options. Some things that we found when looking at these cloud-based tools, the SaaS-based identity management tools, is that these cloud versions of these tools often lack feature parity with MIM. I won't go down the rabbit hole on this, but there are some key limitations with these SaaS products compared to what you're able to do with MIM on-prem. So, kind of the bottom line for those of you that aren't super technical that are watching this is that MIM, you can basically do whatever you want to on it on-prem. Lots of extensibility, as David's touched on. Whereas when you go on the cloud, you're kind of going into an apartment building, if you will. And so there's certain things you're allowed to do and certain things you aren't. Whereas MIM is more of a single family house and you can, without HOA fees, that you can kind of do whatever. So it's an important consideration before you pull the trigger to go to a third party tool to think about or evaluate what those features are. And then, as David pointed out, a couple things on the third party tools is that that feature or capability may already be in Azure AD, so look there first. And then for those of you who care about money, the third-party licensing tools for these products that we mentioned above, and other things out there as well, you will be paying a third-party licensing fee, and that can be significant. So that needs to enter into your calculation. Is that if you want to leave MIM and go on to something else, you're getting MIM for technically free with those P2 licenses, third-party tools. However, you'll be paying a third-party licensing fee. So take a
And,
look or add that into your calculation.
and something to add there too is related to the third party, right? I'm going to use your sort of housing analogy, right? So you get the entry into the pool or in the pool area, and then you have to pay another fee to actually get in the pool. So depending on the product, you might get the entry fee and the entry features. So you really want to look in on any of these products. Again, they're all great identity management products, right? But be wary of certain features that you may need that you don't even know you need um,
Right.
to achieve your mission. So just something
Yeah.
to add there.
Well, and that's a great point on some of the deployments with some of these other products that we've been involved in. A lot of those tools and their capabilities are licensed a la carte. So think about it when you go to a nice steakhouse, you're getting the steak, but if you want the potatoes and the cream spinach and
Right.
whatnot,
Right.
you're paying extra for it. So something to consider. And one other important thing to consider for those of you who are thinking about leaving MIM, there is a significant retraining effort that you will need to look at for your MIM staff. I think the good news is that, as David said, IAM is IAM, that the concepts and principles are, I wouldn't say universal, but shared amongst these products. But the technical functionality and how you actually hands on the keyboard operate these tools are significantly different than MIM. So when looking to move to a third party tool, you will also have to factor in retraining of staff or hiring additional staff to manage these products.
Makes
Okay.
sense. Yeah.
All right. Good stuff. All right. So let's move on. This is probably our favorite slide here.
I would say, yeah.
Yeah,
I get this
the million dollar question, maybe several $1 million, and it relates to should I replace MIM? I know for those in the consulting world, this is our favorite answer. It depends. And there are a number of factors that you will need to consider if you should replace MIM. So I think the key ones here are if you're heavily reliant on-premise systems and MIM is meeting the vast majority of your needs today, and you're not looking at a big uh, transformation or any type of major expansion, often MIM will make a lot of sense here to keep. You've got some runway until 2029. And again, Microsoft is constantly making improvements in the Azure tools. So that problem may ultimately uh, solve itself. Something else to consider, which we obviously touched on in the prior slide, is the replacement cost using a third party tool to swap out MIM for something else is that it's going to be expensive. And where we are in Q1 of 2023, everyone knows what's going on with the economy. So those type of investments are being heavily scrutinized now. So again, something to consider. You'll have to make the business case to make that switch. And MIM is definitely still very compelling for companies, as we touched on, where if you're heavily reliant on on-premise systems, especially Active Directory and on-premise HR systems, the MIM sync engine is fantastic. It still does a wonderful job. It's great. It's supported to 2029, offers lots of extensibility, the ability to heavily customize it and essentially make it do pretty much whatever you want. And obviously, if you have customized MIM, then keeping it makes sense if the cost of moving to a new platform is going to be prohibitive. So, David, before we continue on in this discussion, I want to just take a quick pause and get your thoughts on any of these items.
Yeah, I think you hit all the points, right? It's really around the business case, right? Does it make sense, right? Looking at the current, again, economy, right? But also it's less than economy too. It's like, where do you want to go in 2029? If you don't know that
Right,
answer, from an identity management stack, right? If you are all in for Azure, then I would start moving, like I said earlier on, moving those workloads independently. So, um, of course, should I replace MIM? It depends, right? From an
right,
organization change standpoint, right? Where do you see yourself in 2029, right? Do you see yourself in that full-blown Azure? Then I would say start moving your workloads up to Azure, right? And then
right.
reduce the reliance on MIM or the MIM sync. And then that way, the problem you have to solve in 2028, 2027,
Shrinks
it
down.
shrinks way down. So
Right, 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 right.
I think that's sort of my mantra is shrink it, and then it makes life a whole lot easier when you have to make that decision in
Exactly.
2028.
Exactly, exactly. One interesting thing, and we actually just had a client, a long-term client of ours, who decided that they are going to move away from MIM and go to one of the Gartner leading products. And really, the main reason that they decided to move away from MIM was around compliance, reporting, and governance. And quite frankly, those are things that MIM doesn't do well today, is that it's not a governance engine, it's not a compliance engine. I know that Microsoft made an attempt with Behold way back when, and that wasn't very successful. So for um, particularly larger organizations that are growing through acquisition and really facing a lot of headwinds around compliance and governance, um, that's where we see people deciding to make the change.
Yeah, and I would agree with you that again, if anyone asked me, does MIM do compliance, I would say uh, no,
Right,
flat out, right?
exactly.
There was an attempt with Behold, but again, I go back to what is your plan to go to the future, right? If it's going to Azure, then there's all sorts of compliance capabilities in Azure slash Office, right? There's
Right.
DLP, AIP, there's again security galore, and there's a lot of things that you can do in Office and Azure teaming together, right? With that, right? There's access reviews for those.
Hmm.
There's access packages that allow to streamline access to given folks at a given time, right? So there's all sorts of capabilities within Azure slash Office that fits a lot of bills, and again, is very powerful when it comes to Teams compliance,
Right.
DLP, AIP. So that's why I said don't take the move lightly. So if you're looking for a product, I would say I do the sticky note test, right? Write on a sticky note everything that you want the system to do, and then you put it in the Azure Office group, and then from there you look at sort of does it fit, does it not fit, and as well is it acceptable because compliance is not just it's not an IT problem, right? It
Right.
is a business problem around legality of certain activities that need to be monitored and managed.
Right.
So
Exactly.
in my mind, IT doesn't make the decision; they inform the decision. It's really the front office that needs to be well informed on the capabilities that are within the platform.
Exactly. And I think jumping down to the next point about potential reasons to replace MIM, I think this really kind of goes hand in hand with what you were saying about what your path is for 2029 and where you're going to be. Obviously, with everyone moving to the cloud, lots more SaaS applications. Azure AD is constantly coming out with additional connectors to all sorts of SaaS applications that are out of the box versus having to write custom code in MIM. So that's another
Correct.
compelling
Yeah.
case that you talked about, looking at Azure first to see if it's got that workload capability to be able to handle those scenarios versus buying a third party product.
Right. And just a note there, right? So even if the SaaS app is not available, let's say you have your own homegrown business app that, again, runs the business, right? You have a capability that you can register that app and as well as maybe upgrade your app to be SCIM compliant, right? Um, or maybe the interim step of that is you register your app, you use App Gateway to gain access to it using Azure credentials, using MFA conditional access policies, all layered on. And then from there, you add maybe the ECMA connector that I spoke about earlier, if
Mm-hmm.
it's LDAP or SQL. Maybe that's your interim step while you give your dev team time to actually create a SCIM capable application. So
Right.
that's why I said it's all about the initial workloads that you want to move, right? Whether
Exactly.
you can or can't, and then figure out a in-between solution, and then map out that roadmap.
Exactly. Exactly. Great points there. So yeah, so all about 2029. Um, some further considerations that we often get about MIM and MIM replacements is that a lot of people, and this is really a common challenge with a lot of clients, that, oh, you know what? I think I skipped ahead here. Sorry. Um, Going back to this slide, one of the key problems that we see with the number of clients is that they don't necessarily have the knowledge in house. They don't have the staff in house to effectively manage MIM. So they often think, well, we'll go to this other product because it's SaaS based or whatnot. And I don't necessarily think that's a great reason to perhaps get rid of MIM because if you don't necessarily have the knowledge for MIM now or that identity and access management skills inside of the organization, leaving one platform to go to another, if you don't have the in house knowledge about IAM in general, it will make that jump difficult no matter what you do.
I agree with you, Scott. I call that a commodity switch. Essentially, they assume that they can just go buy folks that know platform X, Y, and Z, right? And you can technically, right? But that doesn't mean they know your identity and access management strategy, the ins and outs of the business. So
Right,
I would say to those organizations that are looking for that just because they can't find folks, I think the better answer is can we find an identity and access management architect to help us really pathway out, whether it's pathway out to MIM or pathway out to Azure, but really set down and look at sort of the before and then the after and have that roadmap. And that roadmap may include another the third parties we're talking about,
right.
but at the very least you have somebody knowledgeable that has done this in and out for their lifetime, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Great point. Great point. Finally, here, One other reason that we see people leave MIM, and again, we just had this happen with one of our clients, um, is that MIM can't scale with the organization because of their size and anticipated growth. And so again, going back to that prior client who, I think they were roughly 10,000 employees. We're looking to make the jump to 30,000 employees, a lot more compliance and governance requirements. We're hitting some scalability issues with the number of groups that they were managing in MIM, and so they ultimately decided to drop MIM and go to something else. But to your point, David, obviously there's a lot of stuff that Azure can do, but they decided to go all in on the capabilities of some of the other Gartner products.
Yeah, and I think here's a good sort of why they moved. So the only thing I heard in your why was the compliance side. So from a scale size, MIM again can scale. It's amazing what it can do, right? So, but I'm
Hmm.
not saying that you don't move because of that. The only thing that I heard from a business reason why the move would be compliance. So MIM could not be in compliance with what they're looking for from a business.
Right.
Um, those other ones were probably caveats, be like or helpers, right? To say,
Yeah,
well,
sure.
possibly, but I've seen MIM in organizations that had 300,000
Oh,
users,
yeah.
right? So when I hear we're going from 10 to 20 and it's not scalable, I have my doubts on that, but I focus on the business side of it, and the business side
Right.
was that compliance side of it.
Right. And frankly, sometimes you just want a new car, is what
Right.
it comes down
Sometimes you
to.
want a new car. Right.
Sometimes
Exactly.
you want a new car. So we get it, everyone. I'd like a new car now. So, anyways, but that is a whole nother presentation on my car shopping. So,
Right.
all right. So let's talk about the path to 2029 here and how you can effectively run MIM until then. Um, so a couple of thoughts here. And David certainly chime in. But
Most definitely.
one of the key things here is that if you're in it for the long haul with MIM, you definitely want to have staff that can manage the system. Ideally, you want to be able to stand on your own, be able to enhance MIM, troubleshoot it, have that in-house tribal knowledge to effectively run the system. We know that that is a can be a big challenge though for clients, and so we'll talk about some other options there. David, as you pointed out, other things to get ready for 2029 is really you want to utilize Azure AD functionality where appropriate to lessen your reliance on MIM. And I think you had some great points there where you want to try to shrink MIM down, reduce the footprint, move those workloads where appropriate into Azure Active Directory. The classic ones that we spoke about, SSPR, group management, the SCIM connectors, SAS connectors. You have a lot of goodies that you've gotten with those P2 licenses. So look at those. Again, MIM is fantastic as an on-premise sync engine, doing what it does with Active Directory and those on-premise systems. So, but again, David, I thought you did a great job in that point of use those
Yeah,
on your workloads.
exactly. I mean, again, I won't repeat, but essentially just look at the workload and see is there a comparable, and then form a strategy around that workload to get it moved up.
Right.
Because you will still have AAD Connect, right? AAD Connect
Right.
is a separate line. I call it the brother of MIM.
Yes.
It was born from the MIM sync engine. Again, for all those AD Connect folks, are like, it's not MIM. But again, it has similarities. It definitely has some changes in it, but the
Hmm.
concept of what it does, again, like I said, 90% of these IAM products have the same capabilities at its core, right? What its mission is. And
Right.
then a lot of them have some great compliance capability, right? But also Azure and Office do as well. So
Yes.
just take a quick, good, broad look to make sure that you're covering everything. Because at the end of the day, it's a cost, right? So
Yes.
cost of running your business.
Exactly. Exactly. So now, if you don't necessarily have the on staff or tribal knowledge inside of your company, A couple of other things that you could do to extend your investment in MIM is obviously look to partner and hire MIM experts like myself and David Steadman to help out on a troubleshooting and enhancement basis. We have a number of customers that have also invested in managed services, which we do offer as well to help run the day-to-day operations and augment that existing team. So there's a lot of help out there if available or if interested. And there are also some great training courses out there from a number of other service providers if you want to go ahead and try to build up that knowledge on your team as well. So take a look at some of those firms out there that have done just a wonderful job for MIM training. So there are a number of options that you can do to extend that investment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So finally, just to wrap it up here, we hope that this presentation has been of value to everyone. Again, there's a lot of life left in MIM. David, I thought that you did a great job pointing out that while MIM's got a lot of life left in it, there are a lot of things that you can do to really get ready for 2029 when it goes away. And by moving those workloads to Azure and taking advantage of a lot of stuff that people, frankly, have already paid for, it's going to lessen that dependence on MIM. And ultimately, when it's time to say goodbye, it'll make it easier.
Exactly. Or say hello, because you never know.
Exactly, exactly. Well, that's another presentation.
Exactly.
So, so anyways, for those of you who've stayed with us this long, again, thank you so much. Certainly, if you need any help with MIM, if you need help managing it, if you need help deciding if you want to replace it, certainly reach out to me. You've got my email address right here. David Steadman is busy in the field. He is certainly making it happen. So I'm helping David out on the business side here. So certainly let us know if you have any questions. But again, everyone, thank you so much. David, I'm going to let you have the last word to lead us out.
Most definitely. Well, appreciate it. And again, look forward to, again, those conversations because I hear them all the time. I have people that reach out to me that just want to have a conversation. So if you're just wondering, what can I do? Just have a conversation, right? I think that's the starting point is where do I go from here, right? So,
Yes,
and that's sort of
exactly.
where I end up. So appreciate it, Scott, and
Awesome.
most definitely.
Okay. Well, everyone, thank you all so much. And again, thank you for attending and look forward to the next video that we'll be doing. I think it's just going to be me on the next video, but we're going to do a quick, well, I shouldn't say quick, but we'll do a deep dive video on a client who decided to move from MIM to SailPoint Identity Now. So for those of you that are thinking about going down that road, we've got some great information for you to consider. And we'll go from there. But David, thank you so much for joining us, and everyone
Thank
have a
you.
great rest of the day.